Well, good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Kent Crayford. I'm the co-chief petitioner of the Portland Public Water District Initiative. And this is Floyd Jones, my co-chief petitioner. And we are hosting this meeting tonight to talk about the initiative, to offer some additional background. We were here a week or two ago at the Mount Tabor Neighborhood Association meeting, and that really wasn't the forum to get deep into this topic, but given this neighborhood's history on all things relative to the Portland Water Bureau, we thought that it would be appropriate to have a longer conversation, and so we're here tonight to do that. Then Floyd and I are going to give you some background on how the initiative came together. We're going to talk about the structure of the proposed water district, its major effects, and then there'll be a time for questions and discussion.
So I'll start with my background involvement in this. Friends of the Reservoirs got involved about 12 years ago when the City of Portland, the Water Bureau, made a line item decision to demolish and bury reservoirs up at Mount Tabor Park. And at that same time, the city was also in negotiations, discussions related to relinquishing Portland's sole ownership of our Bull Run system to other governments, so that we would lose control. Our control would be diminished to 1/13 control. And concurrent with that, the city was also holding a Bull Run treatment panel led by a consultant who's now been on retainer with the Water Bureau for 20 years. And they were discussing building a very costly membrane filtration plant at Powell Butte, which would allow for blending our pure Bull Run water with waters either from the Willamette or the Columbia River. So we got involved initially related to the reservoirs, but over the last 12 years we've been involved in every issue related to our water system. We've been working to protect our grand Bull Run open reservoir system and ratepayer pocketbooks. So there have been many issues along the way. I was a member of the Water Bureau Budget Committee for 3 or 4 years. I've attended all Water Bureau budget meetings for the last 8 or 9 years. I attend water manager meetings with wholesale customers in Gresham, Portland, and Tigard. So a brief introduction of you with your background.
My name again is Kent Crayford, and I've been involved in this issue for 11 years, about the same amount of time as Floyd. I started in 2002 when the Water Bureau announced that it would like to build a membrane filtration plant up at Bull Run. That was going to cost about $300 million, and it was going to raise our rates 76%. And I thought it was really unnecessary for what is probably one of the most pristine water sources, municipal water sources in the world. I organized a group of large water customers at that time to weigh in against this, and we were successful in getting Mayor Katz to shelve the project at that time. And that's when we got into LT2 and we started working against the plan to bury the reservoirs. We got very involved in a variety of issues, both in town and up in Bull Run. We helped try to get logging roads decommissioned up in the Bull Run. I served on the Water Bureau's Budget Committee as well. I served on the BS Budget Committee also. And over the 10 or 11 years working on these issues, became increasingly convinced that the deck is kind of stacked against ratepayers. I've served on budget committees with some of the folks in this room. I think that's where I recognize Daryl. And I think there's some good work that's done there. The problem is the City Hall chooses who serves on those committees, and ratepayers are very underrepresented. Fast forward to just this past year, we had an opportunity, a very unique opportunity, kind of one last chance to save the open reservoirs in Mount Tabor and Washington Park. We had a new mayor come in who said that he was willing to go to bat for us with the Oregon Health Authority. Floyd and I met with him shortly after he was sworn in. We asked him for a few things. We asked for new leadership of the Water Bureau. We asked for them to curb their capital improvement budget. And we asked for him to personally weigh in with the governor's office to get a reprieve for Portland's open reservoirs, just like New York City was able to do. He said, okay, and 3 months later, we got that letter from the Oregon Health Authority saying that they were denying Portland's request for a reprieve. And when I asked the mayor's chief of staff whether he'd ever talked to the governor, she said she didn't know. And in my experience in politics, that means no. He never spoke with him. So, you know, the problem that we've seen here over the last 11 years is not that we have a lack of opportunity, but that we have a lack of leadership. And we had a golden opportunity, and our mayor didn't take it. He didn't even bother to ask the question. And that's when we decided that, you know, our system is broken. It's a governance that's the problem. It's not a problem with the folks who work at these bureaus. The problem is with the leadership. And Portland's commission form of government lends itself to bad leadership because we have one person who runs these utilities. We now have one person running both utilities, 1,100 employees, $500 million budget, and there's very little interest from the other commissioners to ask questions, hold them accountable, and so that's what's led to a lot of these problems. So, so that kind of leads us to, I guess, you know, where we are today, and that is fixing the governance model.
And I'll just add that, you know, during our meeting with Mayor Hales, we offered very specific recommendations for, you know, cuts to the budget. We met with his staff, and most of those recommendations were ignored. And the current commissioner, Nick Fish, has refused to meet with Friends of the Reservoirs, even though we've been really the most consistent Water Bureau watchdog for 12 years. We made 3 or 4 requests. And that's what we've seen over 12 years as we elect, you know, a new commissioner, new commissioners, and they're really either disinterested in addressing ratepayer interests, or they're promoting bad things like relinquishing the ownership of our system or building a chemical filtration plant that will allow for blending our water. So, you know,
Can you speak a bit louder? Sorry.
sure. You know, so repeating the same thing year after year, you know, clearly hasn't worked. So that's how we got to this point where it's time for real reform. And
Yeah, and if I could just add, not to get too political, but Mayor Hales did promise to turn things around. He promised to, quote, lower water and sewer rates in his voters pamphlet statement, and then promptly broke that promise once in office. We came to him, you know, a little skeptical, but with an open mind, and he invited us in, and we worked collaboratively, as Floyd said, with his staff and identified areas for savings. We had, you know, talked about LT2 and these other issues, but nothing changed. And so that's what, you know, convinced us that we really need to do something big, or just accept that nothing's going to ever change. And that's what led us to this. So maybe now's a good kind of time to transition into discussion about the water district itself. This is not a new concept. The Northwest especially has a long history with PUDs. This initiative, this PUD was modeled after Eugene's Water and Electric Board. EWEB is
When you say initials, can you say what they
Oh, I'm
stand
sorry.
for? I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of initials
Sorry.
have gone by and,
Sorry, so the Eugene Water and Electric Board is often known as EWEB. And it is actually a sub-agency of the city of Eugene. So it's not an independent utility district. It's not its own entity. It's simply a sub entity of the city itself. And that's what the Portland Public Water District would be. It would be a new board, but all of the assets of our system, the Bull Run watershed, our distribution system for water, our sewer and stormwater system, they would all remain the property of us, the city of Portland residents. If you read anything else to the contrary, it's not true, and I encourage you to read the initiative, research the Eugene Water and Electric Board, and you can get a better idea of how that's structured.
And you might add that we worked with Greg Chamath, who was the former Oregon Legislature's counsel. So he was the attorney that helped us write this, and he's written many of Oregon's laws. So it's very well written. You hear that criticism that it's not well written, but it is very well written. We paid attention to all of the details. So the district will remain a part of the city. The main thing that changes is the governance. Instead of city council, a commissioner or czar in charge making the decisions, you'll have a board of 7, and it'll represent the entire city. Even though the initiative says that it will be based on the Portland Public School Districts, that's only if that's legal and feasible. And it wouldn't be legal to exclude East County, so the boundaries would have to be moved out. And Portland's legislative body, the city council, after the May election, will work with the with PSU rather, to finalize those boundaries, but it will be inclusive. It will include the entire city of Portland, and they'll be equally divided. Each district will be equally divided. So no longer would city council.
When did the questions start? I mean, I think it's
Well,
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
thought we'd
well,
just go
let's,
through the
let's,
structure
let's
and
just,
then
yeah,
we'll do
why
the
don't,
Q&A.
if you'd allow us, Paul, to just finish up here, and then we can open it up to questions. I think, just to move through the rest of the major, points of the initiative. First of all, it's important to know that this is a volunteer board. These folks are not paid. They are elected by district. Each district will be of equal population. As Floyd mentioned, the city council is required to work with PSU to ensure that the districts are built equally. Let's talk about kind of what it does. First of all, the initiative prohibits spending water and sewer money on non-mission critical items. The language in the charter is strengthened to ensure that water and sewer funds cannot be spent on projects that have little or nothing to do with the water and sewer system. Currently, as many of you know, we have an independent lawsuit working its way through Multnomah County Circuit Court that raises questions about spending of water and sewer funds on things that have little or nothing to do with the water and sewer system. Those expenditures by the city's own accounting now total $127 million.
Give us an example.
The best example is on the front page of today's Portland Tribune, where, and this is a new number, the last I heard it was $40 million. The city's now spent $52 million in sewer rate money on lawyers and consultants and other professional services, mostly studies and other things related to the Portland Harbor Superfund. Now, all potentially responsible parties in the Portland Harbor Superfund, lawyer up and they get their consultants and they spend their money. The problem here, though, is that the liability for the pollution doesn't necessarily reside with Portland sewer ratepayers. And that was the big revelation in the paper today. After 10 years, the city is acknowledging that it's probably not the responsibility of sewer ratepayers to pick up the tab for this. And yet sewer ratepayers, all of us, have spent $52 million. So the good news is we might get reimbursed. The bad news is this was a very inappropriate use of those funds. They've essentially used you as a credit card and borrowed that money. Well, sewer ratepayers aren't a bank. And so, you know, again, this is one of the things that we're trying to solve here. Just gross abuse of what are restricted funds under the city charter.
And another example that you've probably heard of is the Rose Festival building remodel, $1.6 million. They did a land trade here, taking out Tabor money, which was Water Bureau property, and traded it for the building downtown, the McCall building, and then brought over Bureau of Development Service workers to the Water Bureau to work on projects that have nothing to do with water service. I mean, there's plenty of work that needs to be done, you know, at the Water Bureau, but remodeling the Rose Festival building isn't one of them. When they did that, they raised your rates 1%. But in light of this lawsuit, City Council returned money to the Water Bureau, but it didn't go back to ratepayers. So there are a lot of issues with spending money that's not related to the service.
So let's finish up with the major effects of the initiative, and then we can take questions and start discussion. The initiative requires that an independent financial audit be conducted annually. That's currently not done. As I said earlier, these are a $500 million utility combined with no audit. It's alarming because as we see, money is moved around. You're all probably well aware of the scandal earlier this year where it was discovered, or last year, it was discovered that the city's top administrator was moving restricted water and sewer funds around. These are the kinds of things that an audit would prevent. So we need an audit. We opted to exclude the district from the auditor, city auditor's oversight. And that was purposeful because of the experience that the city auditor has had. We have a great auditor now. She's done a great job of revealing some recent abuses. Unfortunately, though, the previous auditor was responsible for many of those abuses, using water and sewer funds to fund politicians' election campaigns, which was wrong. So again, you know, the purpose of an audit, a deep financial audit, is to follow the money. Even with a great auditor we have now, it's not a financial audit. We have a political audit, more or less. We really need financial audits. Next, just want to walk through some of the other major effects, and these are very important. This is a huge opportunity, we believe, to make permanent some things that are currently only temporary with respect to the Bull Run watershed. The city has in its books and its code protections for the Bull Run watershed, but those could be changed with 3/5 vote of the city council. What the initiative does is enshrines the current Bull Run protections in the city code in the charter itself.
You know, that would prohibit entry into the watershed and prohibit logging in the watershed. It also prohibits water and prohibits the system from being privatized, and that's been a real concern of Bull Run activists. I mean, for, you know, the last 20 years, we've had a revolving door consultant on retainer receiving contract after contract after contract, and one of those same corporations, you know, 10 years ago held a workshop on the west side of town on privatizing water systems. And over the last 12 years, we've seen debt amass. So we just want to make sure that those provisions are in the city charter and Bull Run will remain a public entity. We've also prohibited regionalizing our water system. It should remain Portland's system. and we prohibit commingling Portland's water with inferior sources such as the Willamette River. So even if somehow they proceed with building a chemical filtration plant, we're not going to be bringing in Willamette River water, mixing it with our Bull Run water. We've also included strict conflict of interest provisions. On budget committees, we see folks who have contracts with the city serving, there's the conflicts of interest with this revolving door consultant who, thanks to Water Bureau employees serving on selection committees, gets every single contract, decade after decade.
No, I think all I'll say is, this is a reform initiative. It's controversial because when you've got so much money at stake, you have very powerful interests, and you have folks who benefit from the $127 million spent on things that have little or nothing to do with the water and sewer system. You have folks, who have come out of the woodwork opposing this. We expected that. It's our objective isn't to be popular. Our objective is to affect change, and we're hoping to do that. So we'd like your support. We'd like to answer any questions anybody might have. So go ahead.
Yeah, how would the relationship between the board and the current leadership within the Water Bureau, not the commissioner, but David and et cetera, down the line, how would that work?
Mark, would everybody stand up and ask their questions? I mean, I feel like there's a private conversation over here. I'm not deaf, but it's like a whisper.
If you guys want to move into
No, you raise your voice, pretend we're the judge.
There's carpet and ceiling in this room and it inhibits voices traveling. So,
Yeah,
please
okay.
stand
How
up.
would the future relationship between the elected board, the new one, and the current leadership, like the director of the Water Bureau, would work, and who oversees who's going to be in charge, and how is that change made if there's going to be one?
Well, we expect, given all of the problems with the current crony administration, I mean, David Schaff is a political appointee by Randy Leonard. Ty Kovach was Randy Leonard's chief of staff. When Randy Leonard left, he brought over 5 employees. We expect that the new board is going to do a national search and hire new leadership at
So
the
they'll
Water Bureau.
select them. I was wondering about the mechanism for change.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
new
that would
board,
be up
the
to the
new board
board.
will oversee the administrators of both BES and the Water Bureau. So they take the place of the city council in overseeing the management. Your question raised a good point. What happens, to the bureaus? And this speaks to some of the questions I think a lot of the Water Bureau employees have. Everything moves over. In a way, it's not that the bureaus move over, it's that the governance moves over. The bureaus kind of stay right where they are. It's the city council that steps aside, and the new board steps in above it. So all of the contracts stay in place, all of the employment agreements, none of that changes. The measure really, that wasn't the intent, that wasn't the point. The point wasn't to change what happens down here. The point was to change who's making these decisions up here. So that was the idea.
Yeah, the last meeting we had here, where you spoke briefly, there were several groups that were opposed strongly to the measure. I believe the Audubon Society was one. Is there anyone here that are in opposition to this measure that's going to speak today?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to hear from them at a certain point, I guess.
Yeah. If I could speak to the opponents, and some of you got this. So Floyd and I, we've been doing this 11 years. Everybody knows our number. They know where to find us. Of the folks on this list, we have only met with one group before they announced their opposition to the measure. We solicited meetings with many of these groups and either never got a call back or got turned down. So
soliciting support?
we were soliciting a meeting. But the point is that, it's not about the measure. It's about defending the status quo. So we can talk more about that, but I just want to preface that before we have the representatives of these groups speaking. So
Sure.
with that introduction, Ted, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, well, thanks, Ken, for that introduction. And I just have a question. I'm not going to try to present an opposition, as you said. We're not having debate tonight. So, one of my questions is how your measure restricts who Portlanders can vote for this new board, and this board will represent all Portlanders on all water issues. Some of the restrictions would limit people who have like a lot of experience, who've served on budget committees and whatnot, as you described. How will limiting the choice that we can make as Portlanders to who will represent us on this board serve our democracy better and make that board more accountable? Well, isn't it really up to the voters to make that decision? Why are you trying to kind of limit our choice at the outset, if you will?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you want to
Well,
speak
you
to
can
that?
start and then I'll jump in.
So we have very strong conflict of interest provisions in the measure, and that was purposeful, and mostly because of what Floyd and I have seen firsthand from serving on these budget committees, watching contracts come through the two utilities. What you have now is you have people who serve on the budget committee, they review the budget, there's line items in there for spending, they approve that budget, which includes money for their own organization, and then the next day they get cut a check. That's very wrong. I mean, that's a clear conflict of interest. It's not serving we, the public, or the ratepayers well. It's self-dealing, and that's bad government. It's bad utility management. So we sought to correct that in this by, having a waiting period. And one thing that's misunderstood about the conflict of interest provisions, it's not a prohibition against those people serving on the board. It's a cooling off period. Some people are required 72 months cooling off period. Some people are required 36 months, depending on whether they were a contractor or whether they were a city hall staffer. But the point is, just like in Congress, you have a cooling off period before a member of Congress can leave and then go back and lobby his colleagues. We have a cooling off period here. And yes, it may restrict, someone said it might restrict 20,000 people from serving on the water board. Well, there's 500,000 Portlanders. So, if we have to restrict, 5%, so be it. But that's what we need to do to end the conflicts of interest and the cronyism that's been rampant in these two utilities.
Yeah, and those of us who've spent literally hundreds of hours digging into documents that the Water Bureau didn't want us to see, looking at these global engineering firms, I mean, all you have to do is look at council agenda every Friday afternoon and see CH2M Hill, CH2M Hill, MWH Global. I mean, they are the most powerful folks at these water bureaus. And that was part of the intent, was to not have these folks, overseeing the Water Bureau and having contracts continue to be distributed to them. And then on the budget committees, I mean, right now, who is the Water Bureau? I was on the budget committee for 3 or 4 years. I've been asked to not be on the budget committee anymore, but I'm not a head nodder. I don't sit there and cheerlead, massive increases that are an equity issue for the average ratepayer. So I wasn't invited back, but as Mark Gibson, who's also on the budget committee with the Water Bureau, knows, I go to these meetings every year, as I have for the last 8 years. And who is on the Water Bureau Budget Committee? Well, there's a woman whose only income, according to her resume, since she's moved to Portland, has been relying on a good relationship with the Water Bureau. There's another person who doesn't show up for any of the meetings, but his organization receives $60,000 every year for lead paint removal. And there's another woman whose relative worked for the Water Bureau. So what kind of independence is there? That was one of the reasons why we put such strict conflict of interest provisions. Joe?
One of the,
One of the questions that was asked to me in the last couple of days is that the employees that are under the current system, most people see them as city employees. Is that correct? They are actually city employees in the Bureau of the Department of Water. If you do this and it passes, do they hold on to their position and all of their benefits, and are they still city employees? And how do you do that when you move? Is that a legal problem?
Well, it's still, this district is a part of the city, so all the contracts will come over.
So they won't lose any benefits? All right, that's the answer I
When
get.
their
I
contract
wanted
comes
to
up again, it'll be
because I was nervous on
renegotiated.
that.
Yeah, well, I mean, when their contract comes up again, it'll be renegotiated. I think some of them are in negotiations now, or maybe they finished, but.
No, they're back.
Who would they negotiate with?
The
If this passed.
the administrator, still the management. It's the only people who get a new boss are the administrators. Everything else, the structure stays the same. These are still City of Portland employees. Their employment contracts are still in place. They're still valid. All of the vendor contracts are still in place and continue forward. The only thing that changes is the governance at the top.
Is there a guarantee for that long term? I mean, or do you in a couple of years decide, well, okay, that's not working so good, and then you're going to change that?
Well, it can't change because this is still within the City of Portland. This is a change, the measure is a change to the City of Portland charter. So, again, it's not setting up a new entity. This isn't a public utility district in the traditional sense. This is a City of Portland district. All that changes is the governance. So
I'm also concerned about just one more thing too. Some of your big backers, Harry Merlot, Sweetser Lumber, Walker Siltronics, and they're in Beaverton. Why are you taking their money? They don't have, I mean, Walker is in Beaverton, correct, right? And how much are they?
No, Siltronic is on the Willamette River in downtown, near the Fremont Bridge.
Siltronic is a Portland company. They have been the largest water and sewer customer in the city. So they have a tremendous, their process of, they make silicon wafers, which
Sure,
is.
sure, but that seems still like a special interest thing if you're taking a lot of money from them.
They're right.
Well, they're ratepayers, and we're thankful for their support. They pay the same rates as all of us.
Well,
So,
they pay high, my understanding is they pay higher rates, which subsidize residential rates.
No, everyone, the rates are the same for.
And
large-
they
Unless-
did state, for the record, that if it continued, that they would move out of Portland. Do you know how many jobs that would lose in the Portland area? Do any of you people know? I mean, there's 3 companies that said, if the water rates keep going up, we're leaving. I mean, do you realize what that would do to the city of Portland?
Yeah, 10 years ago, I mean, we were so alarmed by all of this that Friends of the Reservoirs actually put out initiatives like this. One would limit the sale of our infrastructure without a vote of the people. The other would create a water board. Can't remember what the third one is right now. But unless you have people supporting you, I mean, individual ratepayers, yeah, we can all contribute $50. You don't get things on the ballot. You have to have someone supporting you. This affects everyone, from the poor, to businesses. We are all customers. We're all ratepayers. I mean, the real problem is on the other side, you have the recipients of our dollar fighting customers. Portland Bottling, apartment owners, they all pay high water bills. They pay the same high water bills that you and I pay.
Well, I also think it begs just the argument too, that when you look at your water bill, well, it says the water bill on it, it is 1/3 water and 2/3 sewer.
Yeah.
And it all kind of gets jumbled together, so I think that gets lost in all of this. And I think it bears saying again, the water bill is not simply a water bill, but in fact a 2-part bill. And if you look at it and look at how the blocks are set up and how the rates are done, while we do have a high water sewer bill, I don't think that the water bills are that high compared to anybody else.
People know the difference between their
well,
water and
if I could speak to that,
their water bills are high.
just to, Yeah, so just to speak to some of the facts. So, first of all, the rates have been rising so dramatically that they are catching up very quickly. Over the next 5 years, the Water Bureau is projecting a 55% rate increase for water rates over the next 5 years. BES is projecting a 21.5% sewer rate increase.
BES?
So,
BES?
Bureau of
Oh, I'm
Environmental
sorry, I apologize.
Sewer.
Bureau of Environmental Services, which runs the sewer and stormwater systems. So, so water rates are dramatically, rising, and that's becoming a larger portion of the bill. The other thing is with the stormwater discount, which we implemented, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. Some people will get a discount on that portion of the bill, so I've been able to control that cost. With respect to other cities, Portland has the 3rd highest sewer rates in the nation among large cities. And we have higher water rates than Phoenix. We're 9th in the nation on water rates. The problem is we're growing so dramatically, we're moving up the ranks very quickly on water. So we have a crisis in terms of the cost of water and sewer. And one of the biggest problems with that, you mentioned, Siltronic and these other large users. If you look at the number of large users and their volume as a percentage of the total rate base, it is shrinking dramatically, very quickly. Portland water retail consumption in the city has declined for 25 straight years. And nobody is conserving water faster than commercial customers because they can just turn the machine off. Or they can slow it down, or they can implement water saving measures and other things. Well, that's a problem for the rest of us because they, when their money's pulled out of the pool, our rates all have to go up to compensate. So we're actually in this downward rate spiral where the math is really catching up with us fast. So it's a big problem. Mark.
I keep hearing about water rates. What I haven't heard is how do you see water rates actually going down? I've heard discussions of wages. I get we got too much management. I don't even argue with that. But I will say that for any employer. So my question is how do you see the rates going to actually get better? The one thing I do see, again from the donators, and this also goes with the limitations others can run, the people that work for Fokker Siltronic, I would imagine, would be allowed to sit on the board. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so they would probably have an interest in keeping the rates lower for the large water users. It could be done by shipping to a base rate from a use rate, raising the base rate or the use rate, high users. My question though is how are the rates going to go down? That's my biggest question. Where's the rate going to be directly?
Well, we can get into that, but Mark, you're on the budget committee, and 2 years ago, who proposed shifting the rates? The Water Bureau proposed shifting the rates to a higher base charge. I mean, I object because then individuals are going to pay more, but that was a proposal from the Water Bureau. I've never heard that from any of the large water users. They just want to see rates reasonable, affordable for all. I mean, it is an equity issue, but there are a number of things. We said we're going to have an annual financial audit. Never been one, so we don't know how the money is really being spent. No one's really looked at that, right? And then there are all these contracts. Who's really looking into those? I mean, I know you're unhappy with a lot of contracting out. Maybe there's going to be some savings there. A lot of people came over from BDS to work on things that have nothing to do with the Water Bureau. Are they still there? We know some of them are. We saw one of them here last week, at a Mount Tabor meeting. So do those people really need to be at the Water Bureau? Or can they go back to their BDS jobs? Yeah. What's the ratio of managers? A few years ago, the Water Bureau was fully funding 51 vacant positions. Is that not fraud? Fully funding 51 vacant positions,
Wait a minute, how do you fund a vacant position? If there's no one in the position, you're not paying them.
It just goes back into
no, and second, I I know about some of the budgets too, because I sit on the PBOT, Transportation BAC, so I understand how they function. So a lot of, first of all, with the cuts over the last few years, there's been a lot of those vacant positions, which you're not paying for them if they're vacant, have been caught, first of all.
Well, let's see, that's,
Water Bureau-
let's
But yeah, but where's
time,
who are you paying if
Paul,
nobody's
you
sitting
get
in it?
Yeah, let's take these one at a time. What's different about the Water Bureau and about the Bureau of Environmental Services is that they set their budgets and then they go raise rates to raise the revenue to cover their budget. So when the budget is set and you have, in this case, 650 employees at the Water Bureau, for instance, versus, say, the 600 that are actually live bodies. So you have 650 on paper. You set your budget for the 650, and they say, we need this much in revenue. They raise the rates to go raise that revenue. They raise the revenue. The 50 people never materialize. All that revenue goes into the coffers.
You're speaking like there's 50 bodies worth of money sitting in City Hall, like it's just,
there is.
excuse me,
There is.
like sitting there just waiting, gathering interest, and that's just not true, because I know this, because we're, as Mark knows too, we represent the rank and file people who are out there and we're trying to save their jobs, and we're trying to, and in the face of management, I've sat across a lot of this table with a lot of the same people that you have. I've sat in a meeting, across the table with David Schaff, and trying to, and we know what's going line by line, or as best as we can get out of the city, because I can certainly agree with you that there's been a lot of city employees who've shook their heads at why is the Water Bureau spending $1 million to refit the Rose Quarters, or excuse me, the Rose Festival's headquarters. So, I think that just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it does make sense to us, and
Well-
that's,
No, but I mean, you're saying, I think
It was a city council meeting, it was discussed at a
Yeah.
city council meeting.
I mean,
so-
but those vacancies are not there anymore, first of all.
Well-
well,
And-
I will acknowledge that you're right. The city council, so this issue was only revealed about 2 years ago. It was a revelation. It was kind of a bombshell. It came before the city council. Ratepayer advocates, ourselves and others, brought it to the council's attention. The council was very critical of the commissioner in charge and Mr. Schaff, the Water Bureau administrator, and they ended up pulling a lot of the vacancies out.
Yeah,
So-
because if
so
there's
that was a
vacancies,
good
why are
thing.
they laying off people this next? Why are they scheduling to cut a few
Right.
people?
But the
I know
yeah.
names of people, I don't have them off
Yeah.
the tip of my tongue, but I know names of people who are slated to lose their jobs because of budget. So, I mean,
Well, if we could go back to Mark's question, because
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't think I heard
this is a
your
big
answer.
question, how will we lower rates? What do we see as the opportunity with the water district to impact rates? So Floyd mentioned a lot of the kind of operational opportunities. Some of the others are, well, let's talk about the low-hanging fruit, this kind of stuff, spending water and sewer money on things that have little or nothing to do with water and sewer systems. Thankfully, legal action has curbed a lot of those abuses, but we're still paying a woman $5,000 a month to market the Portland Lose to other cities around the world. And that's coming out of our bills. We're still paying for a lot of things that have nothing to do with the water and sewer system. And sadly, that leaves us with less money to do the things we need to do, like replace 100-year-old water mains that break in the winter and things like that. And so we're cannibalizing ourselves here. So that's some of the low-hanging fruit. Let's talk about some of the big-ticket items. We shouldn't be building these new reservoirs that we don't need. If we had real leadership, if we had real leadership, if we had the kind of leadership that New York City had, if we had a strong mayor like Michael Bloomberg, or we could have prevented $300 million in unnecessary expenditures. It's just a crime, to have had the opportunity to avoid it.
Reservoirs way up in the hills, away from the people.
Well, there's also Rochester, who has 2 historic reservoirs, 7 city parks, a little bit bigger than ours. They went to their mayor and, Senator Schumer, got things rolling for the EPA review. And they are not spending one dime on covering or treating those reservoirs until 2028, 12 years after this rule is supposed to be revised. The rule initially had a provision in there, it was called the risk mitigation option. It was inexplicably removed. There's only one utility in the entire United States who is involved in crafting that regulation. Who was that? The Portland Water Bureau. And who did they send to it? Joe Blicker, Montgomery Watson Harza Global, who had had a contract since 1994 to study the reservoirs, a contract that went on for 9 years. At the time, he had 7 overlapping and interconnected contracts. He's still on retainer today. He moved over to CH2M Hill. So there's a lot of conflicts of interest. And yes, if you have good leadership, if they had been sincere, they could have gone to the governor, Hales could have gone to the governor and gotten the same relief that Rochester, New York has. I went to a meeting with David Chapp, an EPA meeting to review this rule in Washington, D.C. I had to give the more technical presentation because David Chapp, he's not qualified to be there. He brought a new water quality manager with him who's no longer with the Bureau. He'd been there just for a year. If we had strong leadership, we could have avoided all of this. There were lower cost options.
Yeah, the contractors really run the show at City Hall. We saw right up here, we just spent $23 million upgrading these reservoirs. And in a few months, we're going to decommission them. Well, the contractor said we had to do that. We do a lot of things because the contractors tell us that, oh, this is industry practice, or, oh, you need to be, that's old-fashioned, you need to upgrade, et cetera. And I'll tell you where the crony management kind of comes into play here. If you're a really savvy utility engineer, and you work for one of these big global engineering firms, and you've got 30 years under your belt, and you can sell ice to Eskimos, and you know how to get your projects approved, and you go up and sit across the table from a guy who's been a political staffer since the time he was 20 years old, and he's now making a 6-figure salary at the Water Bureau with no experience at all, but he's managing a $500 million capital program. You think you're going to get your way? You think that guy's going to know enough to say, you know what, we don't need that. That's too expensive. We could do it a different way. This city's doing it like that and saving $200 million. No, that guy is overmatched and underpowered, and he's going to get sold a bill of goods.
We're asking 7 individuals to take control of a $150 million project.
The problem is those 7 individuals who are elected to this board,
They have no experience.
they won't sit at that table though. They will do a national search for a credible, qualified, experienced candidate to run that utility, somebody who has years and years of experience, somebody who's been in that seat, who's negotiated multi-$100 million deals, who knows a thing, who isn't going to get sold a bill of goods, who didn't just fall off the turnip truck. Those 7 people are going to find a very qualified candidate, and then that person will do a national search for another very qualified candidate to manage their capital program. The problem is the people in those positions here at the Portland Water Bureau are cronies, and they have no experience, and they have no business representing our interests. And they are getting, they're unfortunately getting sold all sorts of things.
Ken, again, I'm going to have to personally agree with you on a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah.
At the same time, I still have some questions on my mind. First of all, the woman who brought up the Siltronic. Siltronic is one of the largest Superfund polluters in the Willamette River. And one of the things that your sewer money does is it pays BES to work on figuring out how to clean up the river that these polluters like Siltronic, this pollution that companies like Siltronic have created. So it seems like, okay, you've got Siltronic over here paying, polluting the river. At the same time, they're paying to fund this campaign to change BES and make it so it does non-mission critical things. So that, which leads me to my second question. What is non-mission critical? Is cleaning up the river non-mission critical? Is taking care of the water quality in Mount Tabor Park by, which BES has been in a 5-year program with parks and water to clean up invasive species in Mount Tabor Park? Who's been to Mount Tabor?
Putting those poisons right in there next to the reservoir.
Yeah, shame on you.
I don't know anything about what she's talking about as far as poisons, but I'm talking about.
Let's address it, if we get time out.
Yeah, I mean,
So let's
that's where I kind of get a
address
little
your
lost.
question, but you know what, there's other folks that have questions.
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, I'm
So
done. I just had a couple.
let's answer your question, and then let's move on to some others. So do you want to speak to the Superfund thing? So first of all, there's been a lot made of Superfund, and I think today's article really speaks to where Floy and I, as ratepayer advocates, stand on Superfund. The point of it is, Paul, is that it's not about who cleans it up, and it's not about what happens. I think we all want a cleaner Willamette River. Those who polluted should pay. Nobody's hands are clean. The city is a major potentially responsible party. The city used to own a fire training ground on the lower Willamette.
I know what
They
the
would
city
douse
does.
these buildings in petroleum, set them on fire, and then hose them off.
Kent, what about Siltronic?
Well,
And they're $55,000 that's paying for your campaign.
So why should my water and sewer bills pay for cleaning that up?
I'm not
Because
saying.
Why
the
should
sewer
they?
contributed
When
to the.
Blumenauer's wife wanted to cut back on cleaning
Well,
it
you're way
up.
beyond me.
So
I'm just trying to understand,
So
again,
here,
I'm following the
let's
money in
speak
your
to the issue.
campaign as I do with any particular
Sure.
ballot measure. You always find who's
I
paying for it.
think you should talk Siltronic. I think the obvious reason, though, is that they're the largest water and sewer customer in the city.
Okay.
So to say that that's purely coincidental, I think would be misleading. I mean, they're concerned about the rates. This measure is about, management and governance of the water and sewer utilities and costs, and that's why a lot of these folks are supporting it. But you raise a good point. The city is responsible for some of this pollution. Studies will show kind of how much and from whom. What this article shows is that the Fire Bureau will be responsible for some of the pollution. Sewer ratepayers may be responsible for some, but what the city is acknowledging now is it's really pretty minor probably, because the sewer system may have dumped biological toxins into the river, but not the type of toxins that the Superfund is targeting. So,
And regarding you asked about what is non-mission critical.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be decided by the court. I mean, we're expecting a decision here any day on the 4 items that were brought before him. So that will lay the ground rules.
Can you,
for
who's
determining-
him? I don't know what you're
Oh,
talking
Judge
about.
Bouchon, there's a lawsuit, and it's
Okay.
gone to court, and there's a long
So
list
who
of items.
brought the law? Can you
Well,
just
Paul,
explain that
we're
part?
gonna move on and let somebody else get some airtime. So,
You
in
really
the corner,
did.
so-
Many of us have been at a ton of city council meetings. I see a lot of faces here that have been, but I remember one in particular where the upstairs and downstairs chambers were filled with citizens and some of these businesses alike, all pleading, probably 98% of them, pleading to stop the spending and to stop the debt. And I think the debt is a big thing here. That council that we had continuously is putting us into debt swamping us. And the papers talk about $1 million up at the caretaker house. That's with an emergency ordinance by Leonard, $135 million. How much for the tank over at the Kelly Butte? Another $100 million. Now they want to put another pipe underneath the river, Willamette River, another what, $55 million? When is this going to stop? And if we're worried about conflict of interest, I think we need to look at the one who's in our mayoral position, Hales and HDR. Look it up, Google it. We have a lot of problems in this city. And whatever we do, I'm quite frankly, I think we should recall all 5.
I agree.
I mean, our public health is at stake, and some of these environmental organizations, they do good work, yes, but where are they on the quality and saving our Bull Run water? I don't see them coming to city council and pleading and begging to save our water. I didn't see them coming and pleading to stop on the fluoride campaign.
No, I didn't see them at all on the
so
fluoride,
our
or when I was
water,
out
what we
there at
drink-
Mount Tabor with signs, I didn't see any of these environmental people.
Our public
Not a
health-
one of them.
Our public health, what we drink is at stake. Do people know about the radon issue from the Columbia well field? That reservoir is covered. Right now, it can dissipate in the air. It'll come up into people's homes when you're showering, and, you know, this is serious. Whatever happens, like I say, we need some kind of change. Those 5 are not on our side. That's enough for now.
Thank you.
Other questions, or, yes, sir?
Yeah, there is you mentioned the environmental groups that are opposed to this. And there is a long list of opponents here on this list. And I think if that just in itself is going to be tough to get past that from an election perspective. So I would just like to know, why are so many these environmental groups, which I would generally support, why are so many of them opposed to this measure?
Well,
Money.
many of them receive contracts. There are many on that list that receive BES contracts. We met with Bob Salinger shortly after we brought forth the initiative. We sat with him and said, what problems do you have with a public utility district?
You need to explain.
With Bob Salinger with the Audubon.
He's kind of the lead opponent of the initiative.
Why do you think that is?
Well, he's pretty much full-time City of Portland environmental advocate. I mean, I've served with Bob on the BES Budget Committee and, known him for many years and respect him a lot. And when we first decided to proceed with the initiative, he and I went and had a beer out on the river and we talked about it, and we disagree on it, and he opposed it, this idea. But, I respect him and the work he's done. But you have to understand that, just in interest of full disclosure, as Floyd said, many of these groups are sewer contractors. So on the list, and I don't have, the list of contractors with me, but just looking at it, Audubon has a $43,000 contract to count birds at Mount
Can I
Tabor.
clarify that real quick? That's over 7 years. It's also matched by twice the amount
with Audubon?
No, I am with Audubon, and I know of that contract. And it's $42,000 or around there over 7 years, and it's doubled by volunteer hours that we provide to help count these birds at specific sites.
Yeah.
And so that's over 7 years.
Right, but it is
So that's
a-
like about
it is a
$7,000 of our
BES
$2.5 million budget. How is that significant?
And just so you know, I'm not passing judgment on the need to count birds at Mount Tabor or all we're trying to do is just provide full disclosure that, there's a pecuniary interest among many of these groups that isn't
You think that's the only
disclosed.
reason they're opposed?
No, I don't. I just said that, but I
just to
think.
be fair, I think we should understand, I mean, I have no opinion one way or the other, I'm still on the fence on this.
Yeah.
But I would like to know if there are what the environmental reasons are, since there are so many environmental groups that are opposed to this, what their
Well,
opposition
you have to ask yourself, when they wanted to put fluoride chemicals in Portland's water, most of these people on this list were okay with it. Now, that's a toxic chemical.
That's a tertiary.
Okay, most of them
time-
on this list were okay with putting a toxic chemical in Portland's water.
Okay.
So why, you're
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
environmentally?
Marilyn, let's get,
No,
we can keep,
that
if we
doesn't
keep this
address
to
the
the
question
measure.
at this
So,
time.
so let's speak to that. I mean, to answer your question, honestly, I'd like to know too, because we've only met with one of these groups, before they came out opposed to that. I mean, Zenger Farm, I took my son to Zenger Farm with his field trip a few months ago. I loved it. It was great. They've received a contract to do a very impressive, stormwater deal there. But why would they oppose it? I'd love to know. I'd love to sit down with their board and understand what their concerns are with a public water district. What about the Portland Water Bureau governance?
You said you were from an environmental group,
I'm
right?
with Oregon Environmental Council. You know, we're a statewide organization. We don't usually get involved in City of Portland issues. City of Portland is, the Bureau of Environmental Services has been a real leader in the state in terms of more sustainable stormwater management practices to help clean up the Willamette River. And for example, one of the reasons that our sewer rates are so high is because of the Big Pipe project. And in addition to the Big Pipe, now we're doing these green infrastructure practices to infiltrate the stormwater on site so that we don't overflow the Big Pipe. So there's examples of projects like that, for example, in the lawsuit, have said that those projects are not central to the environmental services mission.
Yeah, what project?
Like Greta Green, for example, and the super
No,
fund.
the
So we
green-
don't want
well,
to see those things go away.
planting
Yeah, and see,
trees.
you didn't meet with us, did you, though, before you took your position? You didn't meet with us at all. You didn't even offer to meet with us. But had you done that, you would know that the reference to the green programs was in reference to the Water Bureau spending funds on that. So we don't have any problem with stormwater management. That's the mission of the
Well, then
Bureau.
why is
Part of
Bob
the-
Then why
Salinger
is
opposing you
BDS
then?
part of it?
Well,
that- if
because Bob Salinger has an interest in expanding the mission of the Bureau.
And
So
because
we
Nick
get
Fish
Well,
said that
let's-
if this
let's-
passes, that he would lose funding.
Yeah, let's speak to this. I mean, I think this is an important issue because this is being used as the, you know, the rationale to oppose this, and it's misinformed. I'm sorry, you know, and I wish you would have met with us, and I wish we'd had the opportunity to, you know, have this discussion before you and these other groups decided to take a position on this issue. You know, the lawsuit, it does actually, it challenges the legality of spending money on green streets, for instance. It challenges the legality of spending water money on green streets. It does not challenge the legality of spending sewer money on green streets. In fact, I was on the budget committee when we started spending sewer money on green streets, and I supported that at the time. And now that we have, you know, it's proven that that's actually saving us money, you know, I was quoted in the Tribune just a week ago saying, hey, if it's saving us money, great. We should support those programs. So, you know, you speak to the Superfund, you know, like we said, nobody has any objection to studying Superfund, to, you know, protecting ourselves as potentially responsible parties. But the question is, who does the liability reside with? Does it reside with the family of four, you know, who's, you know, having to pay this big bill on their sewer bill? Or does it reside with the property tax owner who's got a penthouse in the Pearl District? These are general obligations of the city, and so they should be apportioned based on people's property tax value or based on their income. It shouldn't be apportioned based on how much water they use. So, you know, these are the reasons that, you know, we came, you know, together. And I honestly, I'd love the opportunity, you know, to have this conversation with the other 20 groups who have joined you in opposing this, but unfortunately we didn't get that opportunity.
Yeah, why do they think, anybody who opposes it, that the new people in charge would do something else?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know.
If
For the
it's a
life
good
of me,
idea for me,
I
why
think,
isn't it a good idea for everybody? You know, I don't.
you know,
understand
I can't speak to that. All I can say is I think it was a very reflexive defense of the status quo. The status quo is good for a lot of people, and change is scary, and change is threatening. So, question back there, Regna?
And my name's Regina Merritt, and I worked for about 20 years on protecting the bull run. And I'll say right off the bat, I've got colleagues and friends on both sides of this issue, and I'm here to learn tonight because I still have a lot of questions. I don't like to talk about things I don't know anything about. I know considerably less about BPS than I do about the Water Bureau, but I can say very comfortably that both Kent and Floyd have worked very closely with us, those of us who protect Bull Run, to keep a chemical filtration plant out of the Bull Run, and also to remove logging roads, which did cost the city money. We thought it was a responsibility of the federal government, but the city picked up that responsibility, and we supported it. So they are supporters of bull run protections, and one of the things that I like about this proposal is that it does put the city code protections, which we fought hard for, into the charter. So I think there are some misperceptions about what could happen with Bull Run. And for those of you who don't know, most of Bull Run is Forest Service land. It's public land, it's your land, it's my land. It's now protected through federal law. Those protections are not going away. And those are protections that are supported by people at the table too, and by many of the businesses that they represent, that Kent represents, for example. So I think I was surprised when I saw that some conservation groups were opposing the ballot measure on the basis of logging that could happen in Bull Run. And I think they're either misinformed or inexperienced or just not telling the truth, because you cannot, a 12-member, publicly elected, or 7-member PUD is not going to reverse federal legislation like this. And to think that no one's going to pay attention to what this elected body does, I think is nonsense. There's never been more attention paid to water than has been paid in the last, 10 years or something. It's huge. And I think, there's been a charge made that, well, no one will ever come out to elect this board. It's going to be, the election's going to be held in off-season years. Well, what a way to increase participation in voting.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think people will elect people, and they get to read about them. They get to see what they represent. But I could guarantee if anybody ran through that board saying we want to reverse federal legislation and reverse the city code that protects Bull Run, tree and logging, it's going to be a cold day in hell before that person would be elected. We just know that. And I've checked in with commissioners that I worked very closely with when we coordinated efforts to bring permanent protection to federal lands in the Bull Run. And he agreed. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So I think there's a lot of really serious issues here on the table, and often there's more heat than light in forums like this. I'm really glad that this has been so civil. But let's use the light and talk about the real issues. And in closing, it does personally upset me when I see that the name of the pack is Stop the Bull Run Takeover. Because I think really the motivation for most of the people who are wanting to prevent this from moving forward is an effort to protect gains that have been made through their work with the Bureau of Environmental Services. But ringing the Bull Run watershed bell is really going to scare people. So let's talk about the real issues. Let's talk about the value of green infrastructure within the Bureau of Environmental Services, and acknowledge that there's a serious issue. The City Club today said there's a serious issue. They think there should be more oversight than there is. The City Council even says there should be more oversight. They're tapping a great organization, but like a small organization to provide oversight for two huge, massive bureaus. This is an understaffed organization. I belong to it. I love that. Do I think they can do that job? No. So how are we going to address this issue? And let's talk about the real problems here.
Kate, you want to go? I know you've had your hand up for
Yeah,
a long time.
thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm not very good at public speaking, but I think I can address this gentleman's question because I have it too, and about why environmental groups aren't doing more. What is their concern that the board members would do that would be so environmentally bad? And also, what are they doing about that? And I actually had a public debate, although I'll say it's a very small public debate because I don't think it was witnessed by very many people. But if you Google the Tribune article, it's 50,000 signatures about when it was announced. In the public comment section, I debated Travis Williams of Willamette Riverkeeper and Bob Salinger of Audubon Society And I asked them, I said, I want to know, why are you calling these people, the antithesis of grassroots? When I've worked with them in this grassroots effort for 10 years, what are your environmental concerns about the board? I want to know. Tell me. And why is Travis Williams going on public access television and referring to the city council as a well-oiled machine? Why would an environmental group, given the huge environmental impact of CH2M Hill's influence on our radionuclide EPA regulations and the dangers that puts us in. And repeatedly going over these issues with those two gentlemen, I was simply publicly insulted. They just have fantasy world, ad hominem attacks, but would not, I would repeatedly say, please, can we talk about the issues? And I would encourage people who have that question to read that public exchange, and that will allow a week discussion, or a Tribune discussion.
I think what this represents is our last best hope. The thing is that, there's always opportunities. I mean, up until the day when they cut the pipe, we still have an opportunity. John Kitzhaber could decide today, right now, with the stroke of his pen, to save those reservoirs. He has the power. The problem is we don't have anyone at the city advocating for it. And so if the board is able to get in there in time and we're able to have strong advocacy with the state, we do have some hope. But it's challenging.
Isn't there some federal implications of keeping them uncovered? Like, are we going to have some penalties every year for that?
The rule required that we treat or cover to address cryptoGRDN viruses. So there were options every step of the way. But with the rule being under revision, which it is right now, that's why Rochester, got their deferral and pushed it out. Another option could come back into play, risk mitigation.
We can get a waiver.
Well, yes, and then there's those kind of options. So no, you don't have to go against the law, but I mean, really, there might be a point where you want to stand up and just say that.
We lost the waiver, actually.
Pardon me?
Didn't we already lose the thing?
Well, it was
Not even Berkeley.
well, they didn't apply for that, but what we did is we went to the Oregon Health Authority. But unfortunately, while that application was there, I did a public records request afterwards, so I've seen all the communications at OHA. Someone from the Water Bureau used someone in the community to communicate with the health authority to say, we don't really want this, please don't do this. So the Water Bureau interfered with it. I mean, I could go on and talk for hours on this.
If I could add one thing. The easiest thing we could get, and the most successful thing, which would help us right now, is a delay. Simple delay.
Waiver is the word we want.
Yes, we want a long-term solution, like a waiver. Everybody wants that. But if we just got it delayed, then we could give ourselves some time to work on a permanent federal waiver. The Oregon Health Authority has the authority to give us a construction delay. That decision is made by a guy 5 rungs down. So the decision is being made down here by a mid-level bureaucrat. The governor is the boss of the state. He could come in and say, hey, give them a delay. The problem is nobody's doing that. Nobody's doing that. So we have plenty of opportunity. We just need some leadership.
Can I say something to that? Because I am working on the land use case right now for the reservoir. So this is fresh in my mind as I'm compiling my list of asks for what I'd like to get from the State Historic Preservation Organization and other groups that are looking at this case for the reservoirs. And I do have a list of asks that I could ask someone for that would keep those reservoirs functioning, but I need someone who will listen to my ask. I've taken that ask with these people multiple times, all of these options downtown for 6 years. And I'm going to ask again to a new organization, but if I had a body that would go ahead and act on some of my asks, they would contact the governor, they would take our floating covers option that we supported 2 years ago with an incredible amount of grassroots organization. They could take that today, floating covers out there, stop, pause the projects for 2 years. That would do it. But they haven't taken any of our any of the options that are available. And if we had another body, I would have someone else to go to ask for those options again.
Yeah, if I could add to Stephanie's comment, if the Water Bureau installed floating covers today, we could tell the state we're in compliance. We don't even need permission.
Yeah.
Done deal. Now, that would be a terrible solution. I think everyone would agree. But if it could buy us a year or it could buy us 2 years until we could get a waiver, then great. It would save the reservoirs. It would save them as fully functioning components of our water system, not as stagnant pools. You know, that's what we all want. The Water Bureau could do that today if it had a different administrator. So that's the answer to your question. With new governance, new leadership that's more in tune with what the community wants, we can still save the reservoirs.
Didn't they
But
try
Jenna,
that
can we
once
get
in the park though, with the floating covers, and that got voted down, that?
Well, that got voted down back, you're right, but that got voted down back when the rule was not even promulgated yet. So that was voted down, and the city decided to abandon the project and keep the open reservoirs. It was only after that that the feds came in and said, no, you got to do it, and so we had to go back to square one.
Can we go to the back here and go around?
Yeah, hopefully I don't reveal that public speaker as well. But Matthew Long, 97215, I've seen a couple of cases around here that I've seen from.
We can't hear you.
Yeah. So I did reveal I'm a bad public speaker. Okay.
Yeah. No, just be a loud one.
All right. I'm awake now, thank you. So Matthew Long, 97215, been in activism, I'm a student, I'm local, very local. And I see familiar faces around here. And I'm just acknowledging that because I want to let you know I'm not some random, completely random person from the outside. But needless to say, I was in the company of a sustainably minded group recently, and I'm not going to reveal their names because, you know, I haven't asked them for permission. I think that's fair. They don't even know I'm here. I know I was going to be here again for presentation. I'm like, water meeting, absolutely. I need to know more. So what I did learn, and do have questions that are related to yours, is that according to one of their comments with Nick Fish, that day that I happened to meet and run into them, they said that the money that nonprofits are accepting, getting, somehow is tied up through the Water Bureau, through the system. And relating to your sewer comments, like when they receive these funds, does that mean that the Water Bureau somehow ends up having a more substantial amount of power in relationship to them? How are they disseminated? And right now, how are they being spread? They're collecting, and where would you stand? Where does the PPWD stand when it comes to this issue and the idea of tying up these kind of resources in with your decision making? And do they belong with the group? Don't they?
Yeah. Well, I guess the only thing the measure fundamentally changes about that relationship is it would change their ability to have decision-making authority over the policies at the utilities. So just to give you an example, we talked about Bob Salenter from the Audubon, this gentleman's colleague. You know, he's a great advocate for, you know, for a lot of these issues, but in a position of conflict of interest because he serves on the budget committee, but then he also gets money from the same budget, and that's prevented by the conflict of interest provisions under the measure. So nothing wrong with being involved in the budget committee or nothing wrong with being a contractor, but you can't be both. So that's kind of the only, as I see it, if I understand your question, that would be the only thing in the measure that changes the relationships there. I don't know, do you want to?
I mean, I'm hearing, but I kind of still a little confused. So, like right now, I was left from this meeting with this group that there is some political pressure to prevent them from, as I asked them if they were interested in reaching out to a specific group, and that was their response.
To which group?
I can't, to the PBWD.
You're free to say.
Well, all I can say is we meet with everybody who asks. I mean, we respond to inquiries about the measure. We get anonymous emails all the time with questions, and we try to respond to them. We've sought out many of these groups to meet with and have been rebuffed. The Audubon Society, we asked 3 times to meet with their board, and were rebuffed by their executive director. She just told us flat out, no, we don't want to meet with you.
Are you saying that your environmental group, right, are you saying that this group was feeling under pressure to withhold support of a utility district because of where their funding comes from? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's the impression that I was left with.
It doesn't really make that much sense.
Is there other questions? Yes, sir.
So I'm, as I said, I'm from Northeast Portland and live here. I am also a board member of the Urban Green Spaces Institute, which is headed by Executive Director Mike Howell.
Sure.
So to the gentleman's question about environmental groups and for instance, Urban Green Spaces.
Could you speak a little louder?
Yes, thank you. Let me stand up. So I came to learn, one, as a citizen. And I'm learning a lot. And there's a lot of gaps that are being filled. That's great. Thank you very much for that. As it relates to my understanding of how I look at it as a board member of Urban Green Spaces Institute, this initiative has some things that have been troubling to me. And some of it's in the fine print. I've only read it once, and it takes a little bit of study to really get it. But there's some points to it that seem, well, this is going to be a problem. And as I said, I'm an ex-BES employee, where I worked for 25 years. Matter of fact, I'm the guy that got the green infrastructure stuff going. So I think, you're welcome. It was my job. Well, it was my job to try and help solve the problem of the combined sewers and the stormwater. So figuring out, well, why don't we put it in the landscape? Let's put it in the ground. Then we don't have to make the pipes so big. We don't have to do this and that and the other. So that took many years to work on that. Along the way, some of these environmental groups that I know of were working to push BES to think green. I mean, there are some very traditional people in the Environmental Services Department, and they thought that doing these green approaches was just dumb, and that it didn't relate to the charter, the spending stormwater money on this kind of work. But as it turned out, and if any of you look up the Tabor to the River project that BES is doing, not just down the road from here down to the river, the Bureau calculated that it saved $58 million by using green approaches instead of using pipes, or using both, actually. It's not one or the other, it's a combination. So there's $58 million, but most of you don't know that because it's not something that's put on the radio or the news or something like that, and that kind of thing. The combined sewer pipes are smaller because they said, well, instead of rebuilding the freeway, which was part of the problem with having the pipe big enough to handle this stuff. But anyway, so I don't want to go into all that, but that is some of that, the basis of the fact that Environmental Services, which was a very gray organization that started looking to things more green, not to say that they haven't made mistakes, but that's been a concern as to
what
what's
about
going to
this
happen.
measure concerns you as it relates to those projects?
Well, the initial concern for me, I don't know about the executive director and other board members, because we haven't really talked about this and made some kind of vote or something. But it was
You're listed as opponents.
You have.
Yeah. You're on the list.
Okay,
We would love, since you haven't decided, we'd love to meet with your board.
Maybe we could do that.
Convince them otherwise.
I'll talk to Mike about it. I'm not a very good friend speaker
It's after the fact.
Well, anyway, just back to
This is what this is a good example. I'm a good example of what I'm concerned about relative to this approach that you're using. A lot of you are very concerned about the Tabor reservoirs, and I think most of us in Portland are. You guys live right here. I'm going to live here. I'm going to be amongst you soon, I think, if everything goes through all right. But what it seems that you're looking at this board as being the board that's going to save you and to be able to achieve these things that you have not been able to achieve with the city management or the elected officials. And to think, it's going to be 7 members from around the city. You will have no control over who becomes a board member. And you'll have 1 representative from this area. I say that because some of the way you talk makes it sound like you are going to be involved after this thing is done. And I'm sure you will in some way or other. But what I'm getting at is it seems that we're going to take the system that we have. There's some merit to a lot of the things you said, but we're going to switch to this other thing. And to think that it's going to be any better or have any less cronies to it than the current system we have, I just don't know about it. But the bottom line for his question was, yes, it sounded like after many decades of groups like Audubon, Urban Green Spaces, and others working to get the city to become more environmentally attentive to issues,
What was your name
that was
again?
what they were worried about. Tom Linton.
Well, if I could speak in order to the points you raised, Tom. First of all, when I served on the ES Budget Committee, I supported Green Streets. I also supported all
You
those
said that, yes.
sumps. We got these
I
sumps.
didn't support the sumps.
Oh, really? I did.
No.
I thought it made sense.
It
'cause-
cost too much money.
Well, but it keeps the stormwater in the ground and it keeps it out of the big pipe.
There's a
and
lot
that's-
of problems
and that's
with it. When you
good.
get to the
Except we
detail.
don't have
Well, anyway, we're not going to get,
Yeah, that's okay.
figure that out here. But the point of it is that, we've never, that's not the objective of this initiative. As it relates to Green Streets, in this lawsuit, we objected to the use of drinking water funds for Green Streets. That's illegal.
But it's not. If the Water Bureau does a project that triggers a city code like the BES stormwater regulation, if they trigger that, then they have to spend money on stormwater. If they're doing some site work or something else or in the right of way that triggers that, then they have to pay for their stormwater management. Well, as you said,
As
the
any
polluter
developer
should
would,
pay,
understood,
the developer
but
should
the
pay.
monies that
Okay.
we were speaking to were a direct transfer.
Okay, well, if it's something.
So anyway, we objected to that. We raised concerns about the development of transportation infrastructure in the street that was underwritten by the Green Street monies. So fine, build the Green Streets with sewer rates, but you can't use Green Street money for transportation infrastructure. That should come from
Which
transportation.
infrastructure was that?
Is that Klickitat?
It was the bike lanes.
The bike
that-
lanes.
Sewer money has not been directly used for bike lanes.
Would you raise your hand, please?
Well, anyway, let me just continue. We can just finish up our conversation. So anyway, I think that there's been some understanding or some misperception that this measure is somehow critical of those projects. I think you'll see, we were just quoted in the Tribune on Tuesday.
Yes, I saw it, yeah.
As supportive of them as infrastructure. So, I think that's missing some of the criticism, not saying your criticism, but some of that criticism elsewhere is misinformed. With respect to you say you don't see how this would improve, we're still gonna have crony management. I disagree. First of all, by electing people.
I'm not saying you're going to have crony
Yeah.
management.
Well,
I said
let's
the
just
potential
talk
is
about,
always there.
we haven't talked too much about our current city council, but let's talk about it.
You have things.
First of all, you got two former engineering executives, okay?
Yeah.
And 2 attorneys,
Yeah.
and 1 community activist,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Mayor Hales, when he was running for office, Friends of the Reservoirs and the Portland Water Users Coalition, which is a group I used to run, we put out a candidate questionnaire. All the candidates responded. It was great. Mary Nolan, Amanda Fritz, Charlie Hales, Eileen Brady, Jefferson Smith, and Steve Novick. This is in 2012, of course. All the candidates responded. Only 1 candidate in the general election, well, first of all, gave us a partial answer. He only answered 5 of the 20 questions. That was Charlie Hales. And then after some, kind of pounding on his campaign manager, he finally, reluctantly answered the other questions. But the answers weren't very good. And they weren't very forthcoming, and they were very guarded. this is the guy who said it in his voters pamphlet statement, he would lower water and sewer rates. The point was, his campaign wasn't about water and sewer. He didn't want it to be about water and sewer. He didn't want to dive deep into those issues. He wanted the soundbite on his voters pamphlet statement. Checking that box, I'm for lower water and sewer. Let's move on to the sexier stuff. The difference with a public water district is that these people will be elected solely on the basis of what they think should be the future of our water and sewer systems. That's it. And
There's not
so,
going to be any of the vote trading, you know, as you see city councils often do. You know, one commissioner is bringing this issue, well, next week they're going to vote on something else and they trade, but everybody's going to be working on the same issues, water and sewer utilities. That's going to be the primary difference. Mary Ann.
Lou Frederick says that in my district of Northeast Portland, 80 to 90% of us sometimes vote in elections, and this is really unusual in the entire country. This is a city of geeks. I came here in 1977 and I was astonished by how meeting going people were. People didn't do that where I came from. And so to have so many organizations, more than 20 if I'm correct, who've been working on the quality of the water, not even getting to the cost yet. The quality drives me nuts. Who's tracking radon? Who's tracking nitrogen pounds?
Southeast Examiner's got good articles on it.
Yeah, I mean, like what's happening with that? And at the same time, we have Carollo getting these really low rates and spilling mercury in the slough. What the heck? How will we be able to stop these special deals like the Carollo deal? Less cost per whatever you call it than
Well, we are all
EPS?
going to have to continue to be involved. I mean, people have been working on issues for 20 years. We're all going to have to continue to be involved. There's no doubt about that. But city council really hasn't cared about these issues. I mean, we've elected over and over. So, but I mean, when you're running for this board, that's going to be your focus. You're not working on the parks.
yeah, you know, when this measure is approved, that's not the end of, you know, the need for reform. It's just the beginning. I joke with Floyd, this is a life sentence. You know, this is a life sentence. We gotta, once this new board is, well, first of all, we've got to recruit good candidates. You know, a lot of people in this room need to run for this board. We've got to recruit good candidates. We've got to force them to speak to these issues. And I'm sure, you know, our friends who work for the Water Bureau will ensure that, you know, their interests are protected. I encourage that. I mean, I think you guys, you know,
You should run for office.
need to hold, need to hold these.
We're barred
yeah.
from running for the board, Mark.
Well,
But can you
that
run for
doesn't
the
stop
board?
your representatives from running for the board.
But you can run for the board.
Because
Because the way this sounds, I have to wait 72 months or 36 months before I can, because I was an employee.
Right.
But you could run for the board, and you could run for the board?
Yes.
Siltronic could run for the board.
Siltronic could run for the
Yes,
board?
that
So it's got some, it's got some.
A company
it's a
cannot,
little bit-
it has to be a person.
Right, but I mean,
You
it's
have
a
to
little
have
bit strange
people.
that as an employee.
Well,
You-
ratepayers
you
can
have
run
to-
for the board.
I'm a ratepayer.
I'm a rateability.
Without,
You guys are too close to City
Yeah,
Hall.
we have a waiting period.
So anyway, let's move on. But the point of it is that, you know, this is just changing the format. Yes, sir. Yes, go ahead, Matt.
Just like anybody else, I've been employed for long enough. Okay, I'm one of the few people here that's worked for a PUD, and I do work for the Water Bureau now. I'm not in management, I'm not in engineering, I don't believe in the cronyism that's
Who
going
are
on.
you?
Um,
Who
I-
are you? What is your name? Who do you
My
work
name's
for?
James Emmons, I live in this neighborhood, I live in this city. My kids go to school, I've gone to school here, and I drink Portland water. But,
Who do you work for?
I used to work for Park Rose Water District, which was a PUD. I used to work for contractors before that, where we installed many water systems in many different places. Now
But
we're
who
for
do you
City
work
Hall
for?
Water.
Can you stop interrupting
Yeah, can
him?
you please stop interrupting? I've
You're
listened to
being
you over and
rude.
over again, okay? First of all, I'd just like to point out that, can any of you name, within the city of Portland, there are some PUDs, and the city of Portland has some PUDs that surround us, like the Winona County Drainage District. Can any one of you name a person that's on that PUD? I doubt if any of you can. Can any of you name the PUD that runs Rockwood Water District? I doubt it. Can any of you name the elected people that run the PUD that I used to work for at Park Road, on which there was some corruption and things that went on there? I can also point out Park Road, at Rockwood Water District, the last superintendent before Mr. Rosenberger, who's in control there now, was probably absconded with a great deal of land, and a really shady land deal went on there. So the point I'm trying to make is just because you elect a PUD doesn't mean that that these people are going to be honest and above board, that they're going to be above the influence of special interests or people that have a stake involved in these things, make money off of the Water Bureau or whatever. That's completely bogus. Everybody in this room can probably name who the city council is and who the mayor is. And if you're unhappy with them, you can unelect them. But the majority of you, you aren't enough to, the majority of the people in the city of Portland don't pay as much attention to this particular detail as this group in here. There's groups in here that are very concerned about the reservoirs. They're beautiful old reservoirs, and that's fine, that's dandy. You want to keep them uncovered, that's just great. But well,
What's your question?
The point is that everybody knows who the city council is, and you can, and everybody can name them, can call them, and deal with them. Nobody's going to know who this 7-person board is, at least after the first election or two. They're going to be just as unaccountable as any other little PUD board, and they're all over, and they're even within our own county, and I don't think anybody here can name these people on these other PUDs and what they do and the powers that they have go unchecked because nobody pays attention, nobody hardly anyone even votes in these elections.
Tom, let's truth test your question here. Jim, sorry.
Close.
Who in here lives in the Rockwood PUD? So why would any of us know who served on it?
But the Rockwood PUD is within the city, part of it is within the city of
But
Portland.
none of us live there, so why would we care? Why would we know who those people are?
But
it's not. The point is if I'll just tell you.
Drainage district. We're all Multnomah County.
I know Bob Salinger serves in the Multnomah County Drainage. I voted for it.
That's not true. He's not on the Multnomah County Drainage District.
Well, he's on the he's on the what is it?
He's Multnomah County Water.
How about the Multnomah County Library District? Can you name one of them? We're all.
So what that I know that what the commissioners' names are downtown. What good does that do that I know that their names?
Well, I want to say something.
Yeah.
Now I'm born in Portland, and I live in the Mount Tabor area. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that basically I think that there would be a lot of attention on these candidates because I've received the ballots for the Oregon Country Fair, and I have for 37 years or something. And believe me, those people's personalities get analyzed in long pamphlets, and there's a big write-up about what they believe and who. This is what we're talking about here is essentially, in my opinion, and I have an unusual attitude about this. I think it's a sort of a priesthood of water, and Portland is the city on earth that ought to have a priesthood of water, and this is the sort of thing that we have made marvelous testimony, that many of the people in this room, to the city council, but they don't get it. They don't actually value our water system high enough, so they've let it slip through their fingers quite a bit. And so this is probably an appropriate experiment in regaining some human control of what we all have in our bodies. Isn't that true?
We only have we only have 5 more minutes, so if just people who haven't asked questions yet or
I just would wonder, for someone who has that argument, the known is that our water rates are being spent on a huge amount of pet projects that are not related to the Water Bureau. So hang on, I didn't interrupt you, so just give me a minute. So I'm supposed to stay with this group of people like David Schaff, who, what did he do? He drained the reservoir because some kid tried to pee into it, and that cost how much money for it?
$35,000.
Yeah, because some kid, the water was 15 feet away. where he was standing on the fence, and he drained the entire reservoir. My second point is, yes, I love the Mount Tabor reservoirs, but that group of administrators is not doing a good job. These guys have gone and tried to meet with them. They have come to back lawsuits and stuff. Nothing is changing. And for you guys with the environmental groups, my sister lived in Eugene for 40 years, and I know that they incorporate a lot of environmental projects into eWeb, and she said her rates are low. She was there 40 years, and everybody in Eugene seems happy. How long has eWeb been there? And can we get somebody to come up and talk to us about what is it like living under that kind of bureaucracy? It seems to me in this green flyer that is full of typos, and then you said your name's on here and you don't even support it. So is it full of lies then too? I mean, it's got typos in it. Who is this group? Well, I'm kind of suspicious where you guys are getting your information. You made a comment about projects going away, and these guys seem to have done their homework over and over again. And I wonder, where is this information? You guys over there are afraid you're going to lose your jobs. You're going to lose your projects. You, sir, over there, I'm a member of Audubon, and I love Audubon. I don't want my sewer rates paying for bird watches. I'm sorry.
I don't either. I can do it for free.
We just have a couple minutes. Daryl and then.
Are any of you water people getting paid for being
Yeah.
No.
So please, Marilyn.
Still taking questions.
Marilyn.
has a question. Okay, we only have really about 3 or 4 more minutes here.
You guys stated earlier that, and I'm asking because I'm a city employee, you guys stated earlier that the city water bureau employees as well as BS employees will stay city employees, is what you stated? And that all contracts, benefits, union contracts, retirements, all that will stay in place. But if the board is overseeing the water bureau, I'm assuming they'll take over assets, vehicles, they'll have control over that, right? But if the city employees are not PUD employees or city employees, how would that work? I mean, how would you have a board who is overseeing the financial aspects of a PUD but have no employees who are federally and state required to maintain certifications to even touch a water system?
Yeah.
And with that comes, and it's not just to go take a test and now you can operate a system. We have to have years of on-the-job training, college and state certification requirements, and you're talking multiple years of this. Nobody in this room can do that other than the people who are doing this now. You can't just go hire 50 people to come and run the water bill. You have to have us.
Right.
And I'm not saying I'm all that, but
Yeah,
what I'm
no,
saying
I
is,
think just to
how are you
clarify,
gonna,
yeah.
how are you gonna, how can you, I don't understand how the board is gonna oversee us if we're city employees.
Because they are part of the city.
Does
So
PUD be part of the city?
It's not, yeah, because it's not a separate entity. It's simply a sub-entity of the city of Portland. So everything stays within the city of Portland. The only thing that moves aside is the city council no longer has a role in setting the budgets or the rates or overseeing the staff. That will be done by the 7-member board.
So,
in other words, a city commissioner can't give a greenhorn a job that you've worked years and years and could have stepped in and done with one arm behind your back. That's the kind of stuff that's going on.
A person can do my job with one arm behind
Well,
the back.
so Daryl, we're running out of time. If we just have time for one
I'd like
more
to know
question.
how deep will the annual audits go, and if those audits occur, would it reflect the amount of money these groups get?
Hope so.
I don't know the answer to that. I will tell you this, you can find out, yourself. I mean, we have a list of all the contracts that the BES, for instance,
Well, covering a few
has.
years only, but,
And,
yeah.
but, you know, with respect to the audits, I mean, that's a good question. The measure doesn't get into real depth about the audits. What it specifies, though, is that the audits be conducted by an outside firm, and it requires that the audits benchmark the city against similarly sized utilities in other cities. So that's really important because it's important for us to know kind of what we're doing. Why are our rates higher than Phoenix? You know, what's Phoenix doing that we're not? I mean, why? You know, what are the comparisons there? So.
And I'm heartbroken by this, because I love these groups, I support these groups.
Yeah, I do.
But I'm gonna think twice about writing a check to these groups. I cannot, I mean, we're getting killed here. We're asking for citizens to take over and control the water system. And we're not asking for anything else. I would think the employees would be more worried about the city losing their jobs to some of the outside contractors right now and the waste and fraud that's going on. You wanna know where your pay raises went? That $121 million that went out the door. There you go. Now you know why. I would think you'd be the first ones to sign on to this.
To be all honest, I haven't got a raise in 16 years.
And now you know
I'll just end with this.
You should be signing on to this first thing.
So, first off, we are here to talk about the measure. We're here to ask for your support. And you know what? That goes for the groups that are on this list too. You know, just because they didn't meet with us doesn't mean they can't in the future. And I would hope that Tom, your group, and I'm sorry I didn't get you. Teresa. We would very much like to meet with your board. Could we have an audience with your board?
I would have to ask them if they're interested in that.
I will check with ours.
Okay, great. You know, and Mark, we would like to meet with AFSCME. I know you guys have already taken a position on this, but, you know, we'd asked, you know, for an audience with your board, and we'd still like to do that. And we'd like to meet with your membership, actually, because we sometimes think that, you know, it doesn't filter down a lot of these, a lot of this information. So we would very much like an opportunity to meet with your membership.
I guarantee you that filter everything down to our membership, but.
Can you give us an opportunity to meet with your membership? Okay, well, those of you members, we'd very much like your support of an opportunity to have this discussion. And thank you for coming, and we'd really like to talk to your colleagues about this.
Where in this ballot initiative does it say that we would still have our rights and contract with the city